Welcome to this very special edition of the KAJ Masterclass Live, the show which ensures that you profit from your time spent here with experts, either through their industry insights, information, or simply learning from them. And today we have Andrea Johnson. She is the intentional optimist, a transformational leadership coach. Welcome to the show, Andrea.
Thank you, AJ. I am honored to be here. Thank you.
You are welcome to the show. You are welcome to India in this online form. And I'm sure not just in India, but a lot of people across the globe will benefit from what we'll be talking about. We'll talk about how understanding your core values can change your life. So we will talk about that. We will talk about a few things around it. So first, to understand the subject itself, what are these core values? Let us understand it from a personal life point of view, from a business point of view, from a leadership point of view, so that everyone understand it and try to make their lives better, and make others' lives also better in this whole process.
Absolutely. Thank you again for allowing me to come on here and share my heart. It is my desire to help other people become magnetic leaders or just really understanding themselves better and to be able to make changes in their own lives, in their families, in their organizations, and in their businesses, or even in their communities. And I think understanding your core values gives you the ability to do that. Now, our core values, a lot of times we hear a lot of talk out in the business world and in the leadership world, especially about understanding values and doing your work within your values. A lot of times, though, they're talking about values that are out here, values that are outside of me, things like my family or things like my community or things like making sure, different social issues. Those are things that we can value. But when it comes to our core values, AJ, these are the things that are the principles that make us who we are. So it's a little bit like having my yard outside my house. These are things that I value. But when you come inside my house, that front door is the barrier to people, to those things outside of me. And when somebody comes up to my front door, they're entering into what my core values actually are. And so when we look back through our lives, we can actually see how our core values have shaped and affected and undermined or made more effective all of the decisions that we've made up until this point. Now, I'm not 30 anymore. And so for me to be able to look back to when I was 3 years old and to understand the reason why something upset me at 3 years old is because of my core value of intellectual and thought freedom. And so core values, the way I describe them or define them are the principles that make us who we are. So they're internal, they're inherent, they're things that you don't have to work for, you don't have to develop, they're just already there. And they are things that you can see an external effect of. For instance, I have several clients whose one of their top 3 values is respect. So when they are disrespected or they disrespect someone else, that is very much out of alignment for them, right? It means that they can be upset by certain things that other people might not be upset about, and they will make decisions based on those things. So understanding what your core values are, and I usually try to work people down to about 3 because that's about all we can usually work with. We probably have about a hierarchy of maybe 10, each of us, but understanding what those internal principles are makes your decisions easier. It makes your relationships more clear. It makes your boundaries much easier to set. That's a huge topic right now, right? I mean, setting your boundaries, being able to know this is who I am. I don't have to apologize for it, but I also don't use it as an excuse, right? So I hope that's a good overview of what core values actually are.
Absolutely, absolutely. To understand it in a bit of detail, Andrea, is that my personal values, core values, could be different than others. So
Oh,
how do I
yeah.
know, that okay, these are my core values, but as soon as you step out of your house, somebody else's core values are different. You know, so whether you may consider it good or bad. How does a leader define his or her core values? Should he keep his core values at home, and when he enters office, the vision or the core value of the organization becomes his core value? I want to understand it, because there is a lot of, talk about the great resignation, quiet quitting, and can employees also leave their core values at home and step into the office and look at the core values of different? Because many a time the problem is that leaders are forgetting the core values, the good core values, and they are forgetting even the vision of the company. They are forgetting about taking care of their employees, and that is leading to a lot of hue and cry. So I want to understand then, what are core values actually, or you define them on the trot, like they learn on the job. You learn their core values on the job because it helps you build more money, get more money into your bank, build your bonuses, build everything else. In that aspect, people, it can be a state of confusion.
Mhm.
That is why I want to understand, how do you continue to have continuity in your core values mostly,
Okay.
and live with that, because those principles have to be principles that can withstand, whatever pressures you are facing.
Absolutely. And so I wanted to do put a couple of caveats out there. The values of a company are things that I need to decide as an employee whether or not I can line up with those. But if I don't know what my core values are, then I can't decide. Right. And if, for instance, I worked for 25 years in higher education, and I realized that some of the values of higher education, which are really, really good things that they do, are not things that I value. Right. For instance, at a really large university, when somebody says this is the way we have to do things and this is the way we're going to present information, and I'm like, but that means I don't get to think for myself, I don't need to be there. Right now, to answer the question of do we leave them at home, please don't. Because if you leave your core values at home, then you're not being yourself, and you're being somebody else, and you're living toward things that are outside of you. That doesn't actually get you anywhere. We can pretend, like I said, I'm 57, right? So we can pretend and pretend and pretend and say, I'm going to align myself with my company's values. These are values that are things we value. They're not inherent. I can align myself with my company's values, and I can do those things. But the reality is, if I don't actually have something that comes in that if I can't line my own core values up with the things of the company, then I'm not going to be able to work in a way that is beneficial to me. I'm not going to be able to do my job well. I'm not going to be able to support the work of the university or the company. And for me, that just became a constant battle. I have some, like, for instance, I have one client recently who's an entrepreneur, and she said, at what point do my values become different from my company values? And I'm like, your values then become your company values. They may look different on the outside. But for instance, for mine, my three are freedom of thought, authenticity, and belonging, right? So when I say, let's say I have a core value of belonging. So when I'm working inside an organization, I want to know that I belong, and I want to be able to do things that help other people feel like they belong. So that's how we figure out whether or not an organization has a value. If they have a value of exclusivity, or you have to line up and do things this way, and we're not going to be inclusive of all the different types of people there are, I'm automatically going to have a problem with that, and I might need to find someplace else to work. So leaders, for somebody like me to take that into a leadership role, it's like, even in the university, if they were not as inclusive or willing to create belonging as I was doing that for all of my staff. So my staff felt like they belonged, the people that worked with me. I wasn't perfect, and I didn't always do it well. And there are employees who are like, no, Andrea, you didn't. But when we take that in, because I didn't always know my core values at the time when I was working for the university, but when we take those into the workplace, then we become a better version of ourselves. And understanding ourselves and leading ourselves is always the first step to leading others.
Absolutely. When we take them to the workplace, they become better. Leaders are also employees, many of them, not all are founders. So, why is it such a bad state of affairs that people are talking about great resignation, quiet quitting, and so many things happening? Who is leaving their core values home? Because somebody must be doing it. Who is the culprit who is not doing the job or justice with their core values? Because if everyone takes their core values, no core values are bad. No one teaches wrong things at home. apart from a few examples here and there. Whoever, if everyone takes their right core values to the offices, to the places in public life, even in political life, this world will be such a lovely place. But when we are talking of the corporate life, who is to be blamed? You empower a lot of leaders, executive founders to lead with authenticity, conviction, and confidence. These are such good words, great words for many. They may sound very flimsy, but many want to adopt it because they don't have it, and they are actually not, they don't not, several people don't suffer from imposter syndrome. They actually are imposters. They are not leaders. So in
Right.
that backdrop, I want to understand, how can how can you make it better when a lot of people are leaving their core values home?
Well, I think I want to further define and say that the core values that we have are not the things that we are taught in our. I mean, some of the things, the values that we have that we're taught in our homes, those are things we value, right? It may be that they are the things that are my core values, but my core values are different from my dad's and my mom's and my sister's. So if we're asking for someone to be to blame, I think it's all of us because we don't understand ourselves. Especially in the Western world, we are not necessarily, we are taught to comply. We are taught to like fit in with society. We are not taught to stand out. We are not taught to be different. And I think that may be the same case in India, right? You're taught to, this is the way you comply and you fit in with the masses. And I grew up in Asia, so I understand what it's like in Korea as well. And I think we all are kind of taught to fit in. The reality is, when we fit in, we're usually compromising something that's inside of us. So the way I explain core values to people is, if you want to know what yours are, I have an easy little downloadable exercise that you can walk through, or I have a digital course, or I have coaching. But the best way to do it is to look back through the last week or month and ask yourself, what really angered me? What really upset me, and why? Because a lot of times we can identify what our core values are by where they're being stepped on, where they're being undermined or disengaged. And for me, for somebody to even say to me, wouldn't you think that, or wouldn't you agree that, whatever, start a sentence that way, I'm like, automatically my first response is no, I wouldn't necessarily agree, because that's my core value of being able to think for myself. And so I think the biggest thing is for us to understand that until we know who we are, we can't be those things to other people. And it's just taking it, we all grow, like we start from the outside and grow in, right? It's like we start as children with, these are the rules you follow, these are society's rules, and then we learn how we want to express those rules. It's the same with core values. We are given values, to things to value at home, in our religions, in our societies. And then we start learning, well, how does that line up with how I think or who I am? And sometimes they don't line up. And I think we just have to be honest with ourselves, and we have to be willing to look in the mirror and say, what do I need to stand for? What is important to me? And if authenticity is important to me, then thinking for myself is also important to me. And so each person has something different. So if we're looking for one culprit, we're not going to find it. Now, as far as quiet quitting and the great resignation, those kinds of things, I think a lot of that is that companies are expecting all of us to comply with the same, these are the rules for the society and this is how you fit in. And a lot more people they may not know that it's their core values that's causing them discomfort, but they're saying, this doesn't work for me anymore. And so what I'm doing is I'm coming in and saying, well, let me tell you why it doesn't work for you anymore. Or let me tell you how you can figure out how to make it work for you in a way that will then cause you to either step back into the workforce or have your own business, or just to be a really good change maker in your community.
Absolutely, absolutely, Andrea. So, what are these founders and executives? What do they come to you for? What is it that they are suffering when a lot of employees are suffering? Are they
Mm.
also suffering? Then,
Oh,
what is
yes.
that? What is their suffering caused by?
So I hear a lot of people that are frustrated because they've tried everything that society has told them to succeed, right? they've gotten their master's of their MBA, or they've gotten their lean training or their project management training, or they've worked extra hours, or they've done all of the extra projects that anybody could take on at their job, and they're still not getting promoted, or they're not satisfied, or something is just kind of causing them frustration. I use the word stifled a lot, as if I'm in a box, right? If there's something holding me in. And so a lot of people come to me in this state of, I feel like I'm in a box and I don't know why. Well, let's find out what's creating that box for you. Because the last piece of the puzzle here, AJ, is what I call your ABCs, which is your assumptions, your beliefs, and your conditioning. And I use an iceberg model. The iceberg, the tip of the iceberg, just a little bit that we see above the water line, is what I call your assumptions. And sometimes they're not examined at all. We just assume certain things. The beliefs that we have are many times what cause our assumptions, but the conditioning is all that, we think of that Titanic with that iceberg way below the waterline. All those things that are the things that we've been conditioned to believe that we just didn't even examine or look at or even know were there. So when we start looking at our assumptions, beliefs, and conditioning, it helps us say, oh, I've been valuing something else rather than who I am. And so what I do is I help people take that step back and take a look at themselves in order to be able to move forward.
Right, Andrea. So these executives find themselves in a box. All through their life, they tell their employees, think out of the box. Why
Right.
can't they think out of their box?
Well, because a lot of times, again, we're like thinking out here. It's like to think outside the box means to find a different solution, but it doesn't necessarily mean rock the boat. Right. So we tend to do that for external things. We don't do it for us inside. I think that's a fabulous question because we tell people, oh, they're an out of the box thinker. That's really good. They come up with great ideas. Well, it may be that that's the one person out of all of them, because some people just inherently follow their core values and they're really good at it. They're what we would call self-actualized or very aware of who they are. And some people are just really good at that. Others are just not. So these out of the box thinkers may very well be the one person in the organization that is good at that. Whereas the leader knows somebody's got to come up with a better solution, but I'm in a box and I can't see it, right? Because if the box is closing in on you, you can't see what's out there. So they're asking other people to give them a perspective that they may not be able to see themselves. So I think that's a fabulous question. I think it's a matter of perspective.
Talking of the box, then, these executives, do they realize it in time, or is it many a times they realize it only at a very stage in their time when it's time to enter the final box, the big box?
you know, uh, I work with people to help them get out of that idea, but I can't tell you how many people I know. My mother was one of them who just looked for ways and ways and ways to figure out how to get outside that box. And she was consistently frustrated until she retired. And then she started doing some other things, but and then she got cancer. So she didn't get to fully realize her potential or what she could do or to be truly happy with what she had. So she was always looking for something. And so my desire is to help people not get to that retirement age or the last box, as you say, as we step into the box in the grave or whatever, to help them do that sooner rather than later. For me, the turning point was right at 50 when we lost my mom. And because I watched her and I said, I'm not going to do that. I have to do something different. And that was really what started me on this very last push of this particular journey. But I work with a lot of millennials, especially young women who are, hitting the junior executive and executive level, or they're founders, and they say, oh, hang on, this is not what anybody promised me it was going to be, even though I've hit the markers and I've actually gotten the salary that they say I'm supposed to get. This is not what that I was promised, and I want something else. And so it's like the people that come to me for this new hybrid coaching that I'm doing, these are women who are saying there's got to be something else, and I don't think it's what everybody has promised me. So I think that that's a key.
Right, Andre. In a nutshell, how does one keep these core values safe with them? Our
Mhm.
most precious things, we always keep it in a good purse or wallet, a
Mhm.
nice wallet and purse. How do I keep these core values wherever I go? because they are very valuable, they are very core to me. How do I keep them? What are these values exactly? Some of the things, if you can, in a nutshell, enumerate so that leaders, individuals, business people, politicians, whatever role they go and take over when they step out of their house, they can at least be, at least human. That part should at least be part of their core value.
Well, my goal is for them to be a little more than human. I want them to thrive, and I want them to flourish. And so the best way to keep your core values, whatever you discover yours are, because yours are different from mine. So whenever you discover what they are, is to keep them at the forefront. When we're learning a new habit, we practice it over and over and over. So a lot of times I'll tell people, put them on a sticky note or in a note card and take them with you everywhere and start running your decisions by them, right? Because when you understand your core values, they can become a filter for how you make decisions, especially big ones like your career. When you understand your core values, they help you set your internal boundaries so you don't have to set as many external boundaries because it's amazing how like my podcast is called Stand Tall and Own It. So
Right.
when you can stand tall and say, this is who I am, other people say, oh, that's who you are. Those are your boundaries, right? They don't even worry about it. But the last piece that's really important is that to understand that when we understand our core values, our relationships become more rich and deep and authentic because number one, we can end some relationships that are not helpful, and we can invest in the relationships that are aligned with us. And especially like for those of us with families, then we can say, these are my core values. How am I going to live that out in my family? Which then makes you more real to them and more present with them. So these are some things that are very important to remember, but I can't give you any list of core values because those are yours. I will be sharing with you a link for your audience that will basically be www.theintentionaloptimist.com/KAJ. And it will take you straight to a landing page where you can download an exercise that's about 4 major steps to figure out how you kind of look at what your core values might be all the way through implementing them. And in that, there's some ways that you can connect with me as well if for some reason that's not enough. Some people need more. They might need a digital course. But that's the best thing I can tell you is first dive in and see what your core values might be and then start practicing using them every day.
Absolutely. And thank you for that. I will certainly use that, also add it into the YouTube description and short notes description for the audio podcast. Now, talking about, you just talked about intentional optimist. Why do you call yourself intentional optimist? Do you have to try for it, or one is optimistic by nature itself?
I do have to try for it. I am by nature, I see what's going to go wrong. And so I call myself a realist, but my mother, I mentioned earlier, was what I would call a sanguine, bubbly person. She would enter the room and everybody would go, Judy is here. And she was like popping a bottle of champagne. When we lost her in February of 2017 to breast cancer after 15 years, she fought really hard. One of the things that even though there were things I didn't want to do like her, one of the things I wanted to model better was that effusive personality without undermining or without recognizing that this life is hard. We live in a really hard world. There are so many things wrong right now. And we, in every part of the world, see injustice every day. We see racism every day. We see hard things every single day. In order to be able to be optimistic, present, courageous, energetic, wise, and intentional, I had to create this little life system for myself to say, these are the things that I'm going to focus on. So my core values are internal. My intentional optimism tenets are the things that I live out. So I have to tell myself, AJ, to be present. I have to tell myself, you have the energy to do this, Andrea, even though something is wearing you down. You have wisdom because you've been around the sun this many times. You need to share this with other people. This is intentional optimism is a way for me to live out my core values of freedom, authenticity, and belonging. And as I work with my clients, it's a way for them to live out their core values. And so some of the ones that are they're really dedicated to it, they have them in a notebook and they flip open and say, oh, that's right, I have to be courageous today. And so a lot of times I will walk through those with them. So that's intentional optimism in a nutshell. And it just kind of is, core values are who we are, and intentional optimism is how we do what we do. So
Absolutely. Absolutely. There is much to learn from you about all these things, Andrea. And this is just one episode. You have got a podcast, it has many episodes. So,
yeah.
people, how do people listen and learn from you? How do people connect with you? How do your potential clients connect with you so that they can learn something from you and make others' lives better, their own lives better?
Sure. My website is www.theintentionaloptimist.com. It has an automatic pop up for a newsletter. At the top of the page, there's my blog. My podcast is called Stand Tall and Own It. I did 3 years of Intentional Optimist Unconventional Leaders, and I've just rebranded. But in that podcast, I interviewed over 75 women across the globe who give amazing leadership stories. So especially if you're a woman, but there are really great leadership stories in there. And so there's that. And then I will give you this page, this downloadable link. And in that is a way to get in touch with me as well. You can even email me at Andrea@theintentionaloptimist.com. And I personally will get that email and I can respond to you. But I'm on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, Andrea Johnson, or The Intentional Optimist. You can find me.
Absolutely, absolutely. With a lot of optimism and with the hope that a lot of people will continue to stick to their core values and bring happiness all around. It's a wrap on this very special edition of the KJ Masterclass Live. Thank you so much indeed for joining us.
Thank you.